So the Lego Movie was a huge hit. It showed everything that was great about the toy brand to begin with, and even though it was a computer animated movie to look like it was stop motion, it was extremely well made and hit home with viewers like young children and old school Lego fans alike. And ever since its release, we've had a few spin-off movies and a direct sequel, and are currently a few more ahead of us in the future, including a Lego Batman sequel and a Lego Racers movie. And it's not like Lego was ever a fad that faded and was revived in time, as they've been around forever, and anyone has played them at least some point in their lives, and it even lived on through several video games in the last 2 decades, some more successful than others. But with the fact that there's basically a Lego cinematic universe being built, no pun intended, there's a whole lot that filmmakers and Lego aficionados can work off of to entertain moviegoers. But believe it or not, this was not the first time something like this was attempted. I'm sure anyone who grew up in the 2000s like myself were familiar with a Lego toy line called Bionicle. In the late 90s, Legos were kinda losing sales, so the company decided to create a brand of Legos that could be taken a little more seriously with an actual storyline. And in doing so, they created Bionicle, which was aimed more towards 8 to 16-year-olds. The story they created took place in a fantasy universe and follows the lives of sentient beings composed out of a mix of organic and mechanical parts, primarily following the adventures of beings called Toa, which were basically guardians of elements and created to protect the villages of their smaller-like counterparts called the Matoran from impending threats. Each one of them comprised of the elements of fire, water, air, earth, ice, and stone. The universe of this world was created by a spiritual being called the Great Motunui, which the island they live on is named after. But due to spite and jealousy, Motunui's brother, called the Makuta, who is also the main villain of the franchise, put Motunui in a deep slumber and casted shadows all across the land. And the Toa, being guardians to the land, which is separated by each element, also seek a mission to reawaken Motunui. That's the basis of the franchise, but there are even more for generations to come. The story was spread across several comics and commercials, and each hero they introduced would have their own name. For the first generation series, the original heroes consist of Tahu, Toa of fire, Gali, Toa of water, Lua, Toa of air, Anua, Toa of earth, Pohatu, Toa of stone, and Kopaka, Toa of ice. And all of the natives of this land follow the 3 virtues passed on as a gift from Motunui, a rite of passage of sorts: unity, duty, and destiny. And you're going to need to know all that information for the basis of this video. The whole purpose for that history lesson was to show that the Lego Movie was not the first attempt of a cinematic universe, as there was one being developed and eventually released in 2003 in the form of a straight-to-video computer animated film called Bionicle Mask of Light. Oh, you best believe this film brings the magnitude of tragedy when you find out it's directed by Shakespeare. What you got? Henry IV, Macbeth, Hamlet? Step aside. There is only Mask of Light.
Bitch!
The movie follows 2 Matoran from the fire village named Jala and Takua. Jala is the captain of the guard of the Tokoro, which is basically the Matsunui's army, and Takua is the chronicler, which is to record major events of the Matoran society and serves the deeds of a Toa. In this case, he serves Toa Tahu.
Takua! 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 Takua!
Jason!
They live decently good lives with excitement every now and then, but it all changes when they discover a mask that legend says belongs to a foretold 7th Toa, the Toa of Light that will light the shadows. Jala is mistaken to be chosen for the herald of the 7th Toa, but in actuality it's Takua, but he chooses not to hold that responsibility. Either way, both of them set out on a quest to wherever the light of the mask guides them and to where the 7th Toa is. At the same time, Makuta sets out his children, known as the Rakshi, and to find the herald of the mask and bring a stop to the Toa of Light being born. Now, does some of that sound familiar to you at all? 2 short villagers who come across a golden artifact that fell into their hands and have to go on a mystic quest to a location where it's destined to be, or else face a greater darkness? Yeah, if Lord of the Rings doesn't come to mind when you say that, you're gonna be completely thrown off. But that's the only similarity I see with this. I mean, unless you count the 6 Toa as the Fellowship of the Ring, but I digress. I haven't seen this film since the mid-2000s, and coming back to it, it's not as bad as I made it out to be, and it's decently written. Now, aside from the history lesson I just told, you really don't have to know anything about Bionicle to understand, as this movie gives you a brief backstory of the introduction of Motunui and Makuta. Also, much like Frank Herbert's Dune, there's much that's told to you that the creator tells you in a way that's new, yet familiar to you in a way you'll understand. The writing isn't great, but it's serviceable enough for a younger crowd, and it doesn't rely on lame cliches that make it sound like you have to stoop it down to their level of brain power or something, but it does have its buffers. For example, while Jala and Takua are on their quest, they mostly banter back and forth about how this is Takua's quest and how he forces it upon Jala.
No way! You accepted this duty.
I accepted your duty.
About the mask.
What about it? Are you ready to take it? Finally?
I can't. He seeks. I follow. He's the herald. I'm just his biographer.
Which kind of sounds insensitive, and it is, But I also kind of like Takua's arc in this film, as he doesn't feel like he deserves the praise and godlike quest that's bestowed upon him, because not only is he scared, but because he's so used to recording everyone else's achievements that he doesn't care about his own, which eventually comes full circle, but I'll get into that later on. The animation, for what it is, it's fine. It's better than most computer animated cartoons looked around this time, like Beast Wars and But Ugly Martians, but sometimes the quality does take a dip with parts that were animated and rendered, but given an ugly frame rate to make it look more cinematic when it just comes off as weird. And I've also taken a liking to the soundtrack, which was posted on iTunes about 2 years ago under the 14th anniversary edition. Well, at least they're honest. Which was a good decision to do, and the theme song alone sounds pretty mystifying and uplifting at the same time, and is really cool. Along the way on their journey, they run into the rest of the Toa who help them out through a few jams, and either guide them to where the mask takes them or to fight off the Rakshi. Each scene with them showcases how impressive their skills are, but the same can't be said for the character motives. Toa and Gali have a bitter relationship for some reason, and the film never chooses to explain why, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere but to have a reason for them to rejoice in the end. So, rendered totally pointless. And even when they're fighting together, it's pretty lame. In every other scene where the Toa fight the Rakshi individually, they barely stand a chance, as most of them almost lose their lives. But near the end, where they all group up to fight, they all take out the Rakshi, but neither side is making an effort to do so. Like, they don't do anything, really.
Back off!
Surprise.
Rakshi!
Okay, did the Rakshi just get diagnosed with ADD between now and the last fight they were in? Nope, just inconsistent writing. Makuda's a pretty interesting villain though, as he lives beneath the land where Takua and Jala are headed to, and he's also guarding where Matsunui is being kept. Plus he lives within any shadow and watches whoever he chooses. Wherever there's a shadow, he's there too, and that's pretty cool. He doesn't use his power to the full extent, which is kinda lame, but it still makes for a decent setup. Also, if you don't want to know the rest of the movie, then I recommend you stop here because I'm gonna spoil some stuff into the third act, okay, so you've been warned. Near the end of the movie, Takua's arc comes full circle in an interesting twist that even I have to admit is pretty good. Takua's fear gets the best of him when Jala tries fending off the Rakshi and costs him his life. Takua realizes the path chosen for him was not to be the herald of the 6th Toa, but to use the mask to become the 7th Toa, Takanuva, Toa of Light. He basically fulfilled his destiny that he didn't even know that he had, and in the end he vows the courage to face Makuta alone. Though the final battle is pretty questionable, Makuta decides to settle the score with a Koli match, which is a sport that was introduced at the beginning of the movie and Jala and Takua are pros at. But I don't know how important sports are for this world because I think the stakes are a little too high for a game of Koli. I mean, it's like the fate of the world is being decided on a sports game. Can you imagine if in Final Fantasy X, Braska is challenging Tidus to a blitzball game, or Voldemort challenging Harry Potter to Quidditch? It's just as stupid as I'm making it out to be. But if you really want to talk about stupid, the movie feels the need to occasionally throw in some stock cartoon sound effects. I mean, I can see the intentions why, because this is a computer animated film and there's going to be some cartoony stuff in there, but I feel like I can make some of these scenes improve by adding my own cartoon sound effects. Watch this scene first.
Ali!
Okay, how did you survive that? I'm sorry, let's rewind and do this realistically. But then there are some that just don't fit at all. Like, listen to this one. Why are you talking as you casually walk in on the battle for the gods like you just left the movie theater?
Ice Bear wants his money back.
And near the end of the battle, Takanuva removes Makuta's mask, and in doing so, they form a powerful being with Takanuva's willpower dominating and becoming a stronger being, and opening the door to awaken Matsunui. And in doing so, Takanuva revives Jala before sacrificing himself. But they use his mask to revive him and bring light back to their world, as Takanuva, Jala, and their friend Holly become the embodiment of unity, duty, and destiny.
In conclusion,
You know, I may have had my complaints about this movie, but I really did enjoy it. I might have gotten a little off track with this review, as it seemed it was more of a history lesson than a review, but I just wanted to take you back to a bit of my childhood that's probably never going to see the light of day again. Because by God, they tried. Bionicle opened its doors in 2000 and was eventually discontinued in 2010, but they tried to push it out once more in 2015, but eventually doors were closed again the following year. So who knows if we'll ever get a Bionicle movie in the next few years. I highly doubt it, but I wouldn't complain as long as they stick to the story a bit like the film does. And as for the film, it's definitely ambitious, and even if you're not familiar with the toys, you might like it. It has its problems, but I think a lot of kids nowadays would like Bionicle if you gave them an actual chance at the silver screen and not just a straight-to-video movie. But I know you're probably wondering how much more they can show after what came out of this movie, considering it is kind of the end of Makuta. But did any of you know there are 3 other Bionicle movies, including 2 prequels and 1 standalone sequel? So there is hope. Maybe I'll cover those in a future video, or even the video game that came from this movie, because that's kind of my thing here. But for now, if you want to see this movie, I'll put a link in the description for the free movie that's currently on YouTube in HD, or just buy it on DVD, guys, I don't give a shit. Please, Lego, give the Bionicle one more chance. But for now, this movie is simple, kind of stupid, but definitely worth a watch.